The Pieces Lie Where They Fell by Evil Humor. Chapter 8. Nightblade and Page Turner. Part 1. Nightblade. Waking up in a prison cell was not an experience Nightblade had thought he would ever experience, especially with it being his first official night out with Page Turner, and the actual first time they had spent the entire night together that carried over to the next day. Still, he saw that Page Turner was already awake and, as always, cheerful, as she beamed a smile to him. "Morning, Nighty," she said, walking over to nuzzle him as the rest of the people, as that was the proper term for a group of different species, as he had learned from his tutors, and the librarians, they were starting to wake up. "Good morning, Page." He nuzzled her back, ignoring the giggling from the Minotaur. Turning to face them properly, he said, "And good morning to you all." Not the best of mornings, Nighty, but it's better than others I've had," the Minotaur, Vixen Lee, or something like that, said at him, with a grin on her face, looking at everyone in the small cell. "What about you guys?" "First time in custody, Vix Lee," the Diamond Dog replied curtly, reflecting his opinion on the rude Tor. "One would have to get caught first," Vittel replied with a smirk, causing him and the Griffin to laugh. "Eh, I've spent some time in a few cells to sober up," the Griffin replied with a shrug. "I'm guessing you never did something naughty, eh, Knight?" "It's not something I've been inclined to do," Knight answered back, shaking his wings, "as getting involved negatively with the police doesn't seem that smart to me." "I've spent far too much time in the Grand Library to be in trouble," Page Turner rounded off, sitting down next to him. "Well, with all that sharing done, don't you think we should see about checking out?" Vittel piped up, looking around as she stretched her arms. "That does sound fine to me," Knight said, with a faint smile on his face, although there seemed to be something he was forgetting. "Cool. Can't wait to see your digs," Vixley said with a wide smile, leaning back against the wall as the blood drained from his face. He had forgotten that he was supposed to meet Father and Mother last night, and he was supposed to be with them when they were at the Noble Honor Festival party. Explaining things would not be easy, nor would introducing Page Turner in such a manner go as easy as he hoped. Stepping out into the early morning day, Nightblade looked at his wards, for lack of a better word, with a sigh. He had wanted to leave as soon as he had determined point back, but it had taken Rex the Diamond Dog some time to get his potions back. He seemed to be some sort of alchemist. Luckily, all of them had the proper papers, even Vix Lee for her hammer, which surprised them greatly, considering how the Minotaur acted normally. So it did not take them until afternoon to leave. Still, they were only his issue until next week, and then he wouldn't have to see them ever again. Save Page Turner, of course. For now, he had to make sure they stayed in place until they met the judge. "So, what's your place like, Nighty?" Vix Lee asked, twirling the faux hammer around in controlled turns. "First off, it is Nightblade, not Nighty," Knight snapped, shooting her a pointed look. "Secondly, my place is Blade Manor, and I'm fairly sure Clean Home can find you some spare rooms that my family is not using anymore." "Wait, you still live at home with your mom and dad?" Windbreaker snickered to himself. "You're like, what, 24? "And what of it?" Knight fired back. "I have a place where I belong. Is that so wrong?" The Griffin seemed to take offense at that, glaring darkly at him. All of a sudden he heard some giggling behind him, and saw Vix Lee sharing a laugh with Page and Vittel over something, with the unicorn giving him a weak smile before breaking into laughter again. It's par for the course, ladies, as it is hardwired in all male individuals, Rex replied with a smirk on his face. And I was not eavesdropping. I just have rather sharp ears. Right, Knight mumbled to himself as he continued to lead them on the familiar pathway to his home. This way, we're nearly there. Knight, are you okay? Paige asked, moving to join him at the head of the pack. Yes, why? He turned to face the mare he knew since he was only 10. Because your home is the other way, she said, causing Knight to pull back in surprise. Looking around, he saw that the streets he was headed down were not the ones he thought that he had been on moments ago. How odd, Knight muttered, looking to the road on the right. It would be a shortcut, of sorts. The easiest way of getting home, other than turning around. This way, then. He was almost across the threshold when he felt a massive pressure grab him and yank him backwards. He was about to tell the person off when there was a massive crash in front of him. Looking ahead, he saw a team of flyers had dropped their cargo, and it fell apart and crashed where he and Paige had almost passed. Looking back, he saw that Vix Lee had pulled them back, giving them a concerned look. You two okay? Yes, thank you, Paige answered, with Knight watching ponies drop what they were doing and race over to help. This, however, had the unfortunate consequence of blocking off the other street end, save for the one directly opposite of him, which would be the longest way home. Are you all right, Knight? Yes, I am, he replied, getting to his hooves and sparing a brief look at the blocked way he had tried to go down, before heading off in the only clear way. Walking down to the next intersection, he frowned again, as one way was blocked due to construction, and the other way had been closed off for the Honor Festival, with the only clear path taking him further north and away from his home. When they reached the next intersection, only to see a Market Street had taken up 2 of the 3 possible roadways, Vix Lee had apparently had enough. Okay, anyone else seeing a pattern here? She asked, tilting her head as she stood high on her hooves and peered over the crowd. I think something wants us to go a certain way. Don't be foolish, Knight lectured her, shaking his head. I highly doubt that fact. Where are you going? What are you doing? Watching the Minotaur walk off to a Manchurian vendor, she picked up a fortune cookie and cracked it open. When all paths are closed off to you, leave it to fate to show you the way forwards, she read, handing the paper over to him. That's just a coincidence, Knight began to protest when Windbreaker reached for his own cookie. There are numerous ways to carry out a cause, and with fate directing you forwards, you will always end up on the correct path, Windbreaker said, with a faint smirk on his face. While I'm not too fond of trusting things that go against the scientific method, I can see something acting to guide us somewhere, and I'd rather not see what occurs if we fight against such a force, Rex replied, taking a bowl of food and starting to dine, with Vittel joining him. Rolling his eyes, Knight found himself in agreement with what the Diamond Dog said, as well as their decision to have an impromptu breakfast. Sitting down with Paige Turner next to him, happily pouring hot sauce on her plate, he reached for a plate of his own, when it dawned to him that he would more than likely end up hoofing the bill. Darn freeloaders. Part 2. Paige Turner. She chuckled to herself, licking a noodle off Knight's face before standing upright and eyeing the road where fate seemed to want them to go. She had heard stories, of course, where fate had put several ponies on a path for greatness, but they were just stories, made up or based on events so far in the past that they were blown out of proportion. Still, after being directed around like that, with the streets blocked off and those cookies telling them the same thing, she wasn't too inclined to go against the flow. Not with what her cookie had said. Eating the cookie and paper without anyone noticing her, Paige joined Vix Lee and Vittel, while Knight began to pay for the bill, while Windbreaker was eyeing some Nepalese sake bottles, and Rex seemed to be talking with some ponies about a blend of their smoke, taking notes in a battered-up notebook that she was doing her best not to call dog-eared. "Rex, Wind, I think Knight is done," she called out to the two wandering males, bringing them back to their group as Knight finished paying for this nice breakfast out. "Shall we continue?" With everyone agreed, Paige found herself leading them forwards, trusting her instincts to guide her wherever fate wanted them to go. With all the twists and turns, Paige was still able to place herself, and realized that she was being directed towards the old Museum of Victory. Why in Equestria would anyone want them in that run-down old building? All the actual artifacts had been moved away to the proper new one years ago. Still, she led on, finally reaching the old building with a tilt of her head, the rest of them following behind her. "So, this is the place we're supposed to head to?" Wind asked, walking to the front door and trying to open it. The door creaked open easily enough, with lights on in the old building. Well, when in Rome. Holding the door open for them to go inside, Paige was the last to step towards the door when she heard some pony whispering to her. Turning her head, Paige saw the same changeling from the last night, peering from the edge of an alleyway, trying to get her attention. She thought some pony had been following them. Trotting over to the nymph, she could see the poor Ling had been crying. "Thank you, ma'am." The nymph beamed a grateful smile at her, holding a young changeling close to her chest. "I hadn't meant to be caught outside, and I was so terrified what that brute would have done to me that I'd be unable to care for my son, and thank you for risking your own life to help me, and—" "It's okay," Paige hushed the nymph as she was close to blubbering. "I couldn't just let what I saw go, and I had to do something." Paige ran a hoof along the nymph's side to comfort her. "Just take your foal and get somewhere safe, all right?" Nodding her head in agreement, the nymph flashed another relieved smile. "Thank you for your endless kindness," she said, bowing her head, which caused the foal to be moved near Paige's face. Acting on instinct, she leaned down to place a kiss on the foal's head. "It was nothing. Now you She began to trail off, the world starting to get fuzzy. She could hear ponies calling out to her, and saw the nymph had vanished. Closing her eyes for a second, when she opened them, she saw that she was in a very different place. Alright, that's the end of the chapter. When I first read it, the very first instinct I had was that they had drugged her somehow, like there was a drug on the nymph's forehead. But once I got to the end of the chapter, I realized it was probably like some sort of dream vision involving the elements or something. We'll get more details later, I'm sure. Like I said, I haven't read any chapters you haven't. Read each chapter all the way through before doing it out loud, but just to the end of the chapter. I wonder what's going to happen next. Hope to see you all again soon. Have fun out there. Thanks for listening. All that good stuff. Am I missing anything? No, I think I got everything. Bye!